The chill November air bit at Detective Michael Russo's skin as he stared down at the small body partially hidden among the fallen leaves. The girl couldn't have been more than 10 or 11 years old. Her red coat was muddied, her shoes missing. Russo had seen his share of homicides in 15 years with Rochester PD, but cases involving children always hollowed him out. Third victim in 8 months, Lieutenant Davis said, appearing at his side. Same MO as the others. Russo nodded grimly. Let me guess. Her name starts with the same letter as the town where we found her. Michelle Maenza, Davis confirmed. Found here in Macedon. Jesus Christ, Russo muttered, running a hand through his thinning hair. That makes 3. Carmen Colon in Churchville. Wanda Volkovich in Webster. And now. The press is already calling them the alphabet murders, Davis said. FBI's sending someone tomorrow. Russo knelt beside the body, careful not to disturb the scene. The medical examiner was already documenting lividity and rigor. Time of death. Preliminary estimate is 36 to 48 hours ago. She was reported missing 3 days ago when she didn't come home from the corner store. Russo's stomach tightened. All 3 girls had been abducted from public places in broad daylight, sexually assaulted, strangled, and then dumped in towns with the same initial as their names. The boldness of it suggested either incredible confidence or reckless desperation. Any witnesses? Russo asked, though he already knew the answer. None that have come forward. Same as the others. Back at the precinct, Russo pinned Michelle's school photo next to those of Carmen and Wanda on the corkboard. 3 young girls with bright eyes and hopeful smiles, unaware of the horror awaiting them. He stepped back, scanning the timeline they'd constructed. 8 months, 3 victims, and precious little evidence to show for their investigation. The department had interviewed more than 200 potential suspects, ruled out dozens of known sex offenders, and still had nothing concrete. No fingerprints. No fibers. No eyewitnesses who could place any suspect with any of the victims. You look like hell, Mike, said Anna Reeves, dropping a manila folder on his desk. Anna was the department's criminal psychologist, brought in after the second murder. She'd become a fixture in the investigation, her insights proving valuable even when they led nowhere. Feel worse, Russo admitted, reaching for the folder. What's this? My preliminary profile on our unsub. It's not much, but it might help narrow things down. Russo flipped through the pages, skimming her analysis. White male, 25 to 40 years old, drives a vehicle large enough to transport victims, likely employed but in a job with minimal supervision, possible history of sexual offense but not necessarily on record. It's frustratingly broad, I know, Anna said, leaning against his desk. But there's something else. The geographical pattern isn't just coincidence or compulsion. He's taunting us. Russo looked up. How so? The victims' names matching the locations? That's deliberate. He's leaving a signature. Wants us to know it's him. Wants recognition. Great. A killer with an ego, Russo muttered. Anna's expression tightened. More than that. I think he knew these girls, or at least observed them before abduction. The locations where they were taken suggest familiarity with their routines. This isn't random opportunity, it's calculated. You're saying he stalked them first? Possibly. And given the time between killings, he may already be watching his next victim. The thought sent a chill through Russo's spine. Any idea what the pattern means? Why the matching initials? Anna shook her head. Could be symbolic, could be arbitrary. Killers like this often create their own internal logic. The next morning, Russo arrived early to find FBI Special Agent Thomas Keller already waiting in the conference room, reviewing case files. Detective Russo, Keller said, rising to shake his hand. I've been briefed on the basics, but I'd appreciate your perspective as lead investigator. Keller was younger than Russo had expected, mid-30s with an analytical gaze that seemed to catalog everything it swept over. "We're treating this as a serial case," Russo began, dropping into the chair across from him. 3 victims in 8 months, all with matching initials. Carmen Colon, found in Churchville. Wanda Volkovich, found in Webster. Now Michelle Maenza in Macedon. And all within what, a 30-mile radius of Rochester? Russo nodded. All abducted from public places. Corner stores, bus stops. Busy areas, but somehow no one sees anything. Each girl was sexually assaulted, strangled, and dumped within 48 hours. Keller frowned, flipping through photos of the crime scenes. Any DNA evidence? Nothing conclusive. Trace evidence has been contaminated or degraded by exposure to the elements. What about suspects? We've interviewed over 200 people. Known sex offenders, individuals with concerning behavior reported by neighbors, people who knew the victims. Nothing solid. Keller set down the file. I'd like to start by re-interviewing the families. Sometimes fresh eyes catch details others miss. Carmen Colon's aunt, Rosita, welcomed them into a small but immaculate apartment in Rochester's northwest side. Photos of Carmen adorned every available surface, Carmen blowing out birthday candles, Carmen in a school play, Carmen laughing with cousins. "We appreciate you talking with us again, Mrs. Torres," Russo said gently. "I know how difficult this must be." Rosita's eyes were tired but determined. "Anything to catch who did this to my niece. Carmen was a good girl. Smart. She wanted to be a teacher someday. Can you walk us through that day again?" Keller asked. November 16, 1971. Rosita nodded, her hands fidgeting with the edge of a tissue. Carmen went to the pharmacy for her grandfather's medicine. It wasn't far, just a few blocks. When she didn't come home, we started looking. Called the police. Her voice caught. 2 days later, they found her. Was there anyone new in Carmen's life? Keller pressed. Anyone showing unusual interest in her? A neighbor, a friend's parent, someone from school. Rosita started to shake her head, then paused. There was a man. A few weeks before. Carmen mentioned him. Said he drove a nice car, offered her candy once. Russo leaned forward. Did she describe him? Just that he was older. Not old, but a grown-up. She thought he worked nearby because she saw him a few times. Did you mention this to the officers who interviewed you before? Keller asked. I did, but... Rosita spread her hands helplessly. They said lots of people drive through the neighborhood. Outside, Russo and Keller compared notes from their interviews with the families of all 3 victims. Wanda Volkovich's mother mentioned a man watching her daughter at the grocery store 2 weeks before she disappeared, Keller said. And Michelle Maenza's teacher noticed a car idling near the school playground multiple times. Could be the same guy, Russo said. Stalking them, learning their routines. Descriptions are vague. White male, 30s to 40s, average build. Could be anyone. But it fits with what Anna suggested, he observed them before abducting them. Back at the station, they added the new information to the investigation board. A possible stalking phase before abduction. A man in a car, watching. It wasn't much, but it was something. We need to canvass those neighborhoods again, Russo said. Someone must have seen this guy. The next day, Russo and Officer Martinez knocked on doors in Carmen Colon's neighborhood, showing a sketch artist's rendering based on the vague descriptions they'd compiled. Most residents shook their heads. A few thought the face looked familiar but couldn't place it. Then, at a small convenience store 3 blocks from Carmen's apartment, the elderly owner squinted at the sketch and nodded slowly. Yeah, I've seen him. Used to come in pretty regular. Always bought cigarettes, Marlboros. Sometimes candy. When's the last time you saw him? Russo asked, pulse quickening. Maybe 3, 4 months ago. Around when that poor girl disappeared. Haven't seen him since. Did he ever talk to you? Give a name, mention where he worked. The owner rubbed his chin. Once mentioned something about deliveries. Maybe a delivery driver. Had a uniform sometimes, dark blue. It wasn't much, but it was their first solid lead. A man in a dark blue uniform who might work as a delivery driver, who disappeared from the neighborhood after Carmen's murder. The break in the case came unexpectedly from the Webster investigation. A woman called the tip line, saying she'd seen a blue van parked near where Wanda Volkovich was last seen. She'd noticed it because the driver had been sitting there for over an hour, just watching the street. Did you see the driver? Russo asked when he called her back. Just that he was white, medium build. Wearing what looked like a uniform. What kind of uniform? Dark blue. Like a workman or delivery person. She paused. There was a logo on the van, but I couldn't make it out. Something with an eagle, I think. Russo's heart raced as he hung up. They finally had something concrete, a blue van with an eagle logo, driven by a man in a blue uniform. It took 3 days of checking every delivery company, utility service, and courier in the Rochester area before they found it, Eagle Express Couriers, a small delivery service with a fleet of blue vans and Navy uniforms. We need employee records for 1971 through 1973, Keller told the manager, flashing his FBI credentials. The manager, nervous but cooperative, pulled file boxes from a storage room. We've had about 30 drivers through those years. Some stay only a few months. They spent hours poring over employment records, cross-referencing with their suspect parameters. 5 potential matches emerged, white males between 25 to 40 who had worked routes that included the neighborhoods where the girls had lived. 3 were quickly eliminated, 1 had been in the hospital during Wanda's abduction, another had moved to California before Michelle's murder, and the 3rd had an alibi confirmed by multiple co-workers. That left 2, Robert Smalls, 37, who had quit shortly after Carmen's murder, and James Barton, 42, who still worked for the company but had transferred to the shipping warehouse after Michelle's death. Both fit the profile, Anna said when they briefed her. Both had access to the neighborhoods, knowledge of the area, vehicles that wouldn't raise suspicion. Smalls has a prior, indecent exposure in '68, Keller noted. Barton's clean, but his shift supervisor says he's odd around women. Russo rubbed his temples. We need more. This isn't enough for a warrant. They decided to interview both men, approaching Barton first at the Eagle Express warehouse. He was thin, with darting eyes that never quite met theirs. Just routine questions about some incidents in areas on your old routes, Russo explained casually. Barton answered mechanically, offering nothing incriminating but setting off every alarm in Russo's instincts. When asked about his whereabouts during the times of the abductions, he claimed to have been working or at home alone. Robert Smalls proved harder to find. He'd left no forwarding address when he quit Eagles Express, and his former landlord said he'd moved out suddenly, owing 2 months' rent. That's suspicious timing, Keller said as they left Small's former apartment building. Quitting his job, disappearing right after Carmen's murder. But then why did the killings continue? Russo countered. If Smalls is our guy and he left town, who killed Wanda and Michelle? The question haunted them as the investigation stretched into its 9th month. The FBI expanded their search for Smalls nationwide, while Rochester PD kept close tabs on Barton. Neither approach yielded results. Then Anna made a connection they'd all missed. Delivery drivers often have partnerships or fill in for each other, she said during a late-night strategy session. What if Barton and Smalls knew each other? What if they're somehow both involved? Records confirmed her hunch, Barton and Smalls had worked overlapping shifts for 6 months. Former co-workers recalled them occasionally having lunch together, though they weren't close friends. We need to push Barton harder, Russo insisted. If there's a connection, he knows what it is. They brought Barton in for formal questioning, this time making it clear he was a person of interest. For hours, he maintained his innocence, sweating but steady in his denials. "Where's Robert Smalls?" Russo finally asked bluntly. Something flickered across Barton's face, surprise, fear, Russo couldn't quite tell. "I haven't seen Bob in years. He quit, moved away." "Where did he move to?" "I don't know. We weren't friends." "But you worked together. Had lunch together sometimes." Barton's eyes narrowed. "Who told you that?" "We know a lot more than you think, James," Keller interjected smoothly. "We know about the blue van. The girls. The pattern." "I don't know what you're talking about," Barton insisted, but a tremor had entered his voice. "3 girls, James. 3 towns. All with matching initials. That's not coincidence." Barton's face drained of color. "I want a lawyer." They had to release him, but kept him under surveillance. 3 days later, Barton packed his car in the middle of the night and headed west out of Rochester. The tale followed him to a remote cabin in the Allegheny foothills, owned by a relative of Smalls. The raid yielded nothing incriminating at first, no trophies from the victims, no evidence linking either man to the murders. But in a locked shed behind the cabin, they found a blue van with the faded Eagle Express logo painted over. Inside, luminol revealed traces of blood that had seeped into the floor mats. But even with the van, the case against either man remained circumstantial. DNA testing was years away from becoming a reliable forensic tool. Without a confession or an eyewitness, the district attorney was reluctant to press charges. Russo and Keller pushed for indictments anyway, convinced they had the right suspects. The grand jury declined to indict, citing insufficient evidence. Barton disappeared again, and Smalls remained unaccounted for. 5 years later, Russo was still with Rochester PD, now heading the cold case unit he'd convinced the department to establish. The Alphabet Murders file occupied a prominent place on his shelf, 3 thick binders of dead ends and almost breakthroughs. He'd learned that Robert Smalls had died in a single-car accident in Ohio in 1976, taking whatever secrets he might have held to his grave. Barton had been spotted in Florida, Pennsylvania, and briefly back in New York, but never arrested. On the anniversary of Michelle Maenza's disappearance, Russo often visited her grave, leaving flowers and renewing a silent promise to find justice. This year, as he approached the cemetery, he noticed another visitor standing at her headstone, Anna Reeves, who had left the department 3 years earlier for a teaching position but had never stopped working the case in her spare time. "I thought I might find you here," she said as he approached. "Old habits," he replied. "Any news on your end?" She hesitated. "Maybe. I've been reviewing old interviews, looking for inconsistencies. There's something about Eagle Express that never sat right with me." "What do you mean?" "Their routes. I mapped them against the abduction sites and dump locations. There's too much overlap to be coincidence. But it's more than that, the timing of route changes, driver reassignments. You think someone at the company was covering for Barton and Smalls? Or directing them?" Anna pulled a folder from her bag. "The owner, Victor Marsh, personally approved route changes that put both men in the vicinity of each victim shortly before their abductions." Russo took the folder, scanning her meticulously reconstructed timeline. "This would make Marsh, what, an accomplice? The mastermind?" "I don't know yet. But 3 weeks ago, Eagle Express suddenly closed shop. Marsh sold his house and disappeared." Russo felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with a fresh lead. "We need to find him." "Already working on it. Last credit card activity was in Arizona." They stood in silence for a moment, gazing at Michelle's headstone. The case had defined both their careers, shaped their lives in ways neither had anticipated. "We'll find the truth," Russo said finally. "However long it takes." Anna nodded. "The families deserve that much." The girls deserve that much. As they walked back to their cars, Russo couldn't shake the feeling that they were closer than ever to answers, and yet still far from justice. The pattern that had emerged suggested something more complex than they'd initially theorized. Not just a serial predator, but possibly a network. Not just opportunity, but calculation. The alphabet murders had never been random. The matching initials, the precise geography of abductions and body disposals, it spoke of planning, of symbolism that still eluded them years later. Somewhere in Rochester, perhaps, or scattered across the country now, were men who knew the truth. Men who had orchestrated or participated in the deaths of 3 young girls whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time, with names that fit a pattern only a killer could conceive. Russo started his car, Anna's file on the passenger seat beside him. The case had gone cold once. He wouldn't let it happen again. In his rearview mirror, the cemetery receded, but the questions remained. Why those particular girls? What did the pattern truly signify? And most importantly, was it really over, or merely paused? The answers existed somewhere. In a witness who had yet to come forward. In evidence not yet discovered. In connections not yet made. And Russo would find them, however long it took. Justice had no expiration date. And neither did his promise to 3 girls whose names now evoked both tragedy and determination in equal measure: Carmen, Wanda, Michelle. The alphabet murders remained unsolved, but not forgotten, and not abandoned. As Rochester's skyline appeared on the horizon, Russo made a decision. It was time to reopen the investigation officially. Time to pursue the new lead, track down Victor Marsh, and finally uncover the truth that had eluded them for so long. The killer, or killers, had left a pattern. A signature. A challenge. And Detective Michael Russo was finally ready to answer it.